Hi folks, welcome to RJA Impact. With all the collateral damage that has impacted the crypto industry since the demise of FTX, I started to look at the wider crypto marketplace to see where similar risks might exist and what might be the long-term impact. In doing so, I came across a singular risky asset that has the potential to either make and shore up the crypto marketplace for the future or crush the industry once and for all. I therefore decided to focus on that alone, and so I'm going to take you on a journey from beginning to end with a laser sight on Tether. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what Tether is, how it differs from traditional cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, what risks exist just from its own existence, both positive and negative, and what could happen in case it becomes unstable. All will become clear. As most people are aware, 2022 has been a bloodbath for crypto. There has been a huge exit of retail investors away from owning crypto. A large number have been forced out with the collapse of companies like FTX, or left with what they've got. In both cases, they've suffered huge losses and taken away a small fraction of what they started the year with. FTX has undoubtedly been a disaster for the crypto space. There are approximately 1 million creditors of the firm and, as we know, an $8 billion hole on its balance sheet. However, at this point, a couple of weeks on, the marketplace seems to have absorbed the pain from FTX. There will no doubt be further consolidations to support weakened crypto companies or failures, but at this stage, the big players seem to be somewhat stable. Even cryptos themselves seem to be recovering. Bitcoin, for example, having dropped to around 16k just after the FTX collapse, has recovered to nearer $18,000. A time bomb, however, is sitting in their midst. This is Tether USDT. If you thought FTX was large, this is a comparison of the size of FTX compared with the market capitalization of Tether. So, what is Tether? Very simply, Tether USDT is a type of cryptocurrency that has been designated a stablecoin. It's the largest stablecoin in the world. Just by itself, it's actually the third largest cryptocurrency in existence. At mid-December 2022, it had a market capitalization of $65 billion. I mentioned stablecoin. Now look at this comparison of the top three cryptos, including Tether, between mid-November and mid-December, where Bitcoin and Ethereum have dropped significantly. Tether has remained broadly stable, and that is what it's supposed to do. You've heard people extolling the virtues of cryptos like Bitcoin as being decentralized. No one has control of the whole Bitcoin. Each individual has their own to do with what they will. Tether, on the other hand, is a centralized crypto. Control is tightly managed, and this, it turns out, is extremely important, as you will see. Let's take a quick look at the market price of USDT Tether, which should in theory be $1 at all times. As you can see, it's broadly, within a certain level of tolerance, does maintain this relationship. However, very troubling are these points where the coin deviates by what I would call significant amounts. Why should this be the case? You'll see shortly that Tether is designed to match the dollar at all times, and these deviations should be troubling you also. Why is the matching not working? You'll understand this after we get through a little bit more explanation. So what is a stablecoin? Well, stablecoins are digital currencies whose value is tied to that of another asset, most often the US dollar. They can be used in similar ways to other cryptos to make payments, etc. The benefit ideally is that the sender and receiver are not subject to the vagaries of changing prices. If you want the technical terminology, well, I'm going to give it to you anyway. Tether is a fiat collateralized stablecoin. The way it works, as an example to illustrate, is that the issuer of Tether will take in $1 for every USDT Tether it issues. At any time, an owner of Tether can go to the issuer and swap their USDT back for $1. So for every Tether coin out there on a one-to-one basis, there should be $1 of cash in the issuer's bank, just ready to pay back anyone who redeems. This cash in the bank is the collateral part of the terminology, and fiat refers to the fact that it is backed by dollars. So with a market capitalization of around $66 billion of Tether, you might expect the issuer to have $66 billion in the bank. Well, you don't in the case of Tether. You'll see other assets as well as cash. This is part of the risk I spoke about, and we'll get back to this point a little bit later. Let's give you a little bit of background on the history of Tether, as we'll learn some key facts along the way that will also be important as we examine risk. USDT was originally known as Realcoin and founded in July 2014, primarily to deal with the high volatility of the price of cryptocurrencies and a lack of convertibility between cryptocurrencies and fiat currencies. Also important to note, Tether is closely linked to the crypto exchange Bitfinex, as it shares the same parent company iFinex. Bear this in mind, you might already have jumped to the fact that Tether is centralized. It is Bitfinex and iFinex who are the controllers and issuers of Tether. I might refer these together as Tether or the issuer or controller for brevity as we go through the rest of this exploration. Without going into the complexities of the mechanism on how Tether works in practice, be aware simply that the token Tether sits on top of other crypto blockchains like Ether to exist. You don't really need to know the detail much more than that to understand the journey we're going on. Originally, Tether was what it purported to be. Every USDT was backed with $1 in bank accounts. A red flag should arise when I tell you that Tether has falsely claimed that it is backed one-to-one with $1 when it wasn't. Also, while it should have been cash matched with the token, in actual fact, the $66 billion is made up of a number of different types of asset. In theory, these should equate to the $66 billion that Tether represents in the marketplace. Does that present some risk, I hear you say? Yes, you're dead right, it does. Tether has ridden over some false claims and fines by regulators, however, and hence it does find itself amongst the crypto leaders today. So if not cash, how is USDT backed? Well, in March 2019, Tether updated its disclosure statement claiming that its tokens are no longer backed by 100% US dollar deposits. The reserves, which Tether says 100% match the tokens out there, now include the following: cash, cash equivalents, corporate bonds, commercial paper, loans, other investments including digital currencies. According to Tether themselves, the reserves serve as a guarantee that if everybody wanted to convert USDT into fiat currency, they could. But hold on, let's just back up a bit. Corporate bonds, commercial paper, loans are all loans to companies of one type or another. What happens if those companies can't pay the loans back? Loans that you consider assets are far more risky than cash holdings if their value falls due to delinquency or a recession, etc. So where is the one-to-one matching then? You may well ask. What are these other investments, including digital currencies? Well, you should be able to see by now that Tether are backing what should be a stablecoin by design with other cryptos with all that volatility. If I were somewhat of a cynic, I would be thinking that Tether could be using its dollars to invest rather than as a backup for Tether in circulation. Sure as well looks like that to me. And yes, does using collateral, which should be for the benefit of the owners of Tether, to invest seem analogous to what was going on with FTX? Yep, looks that way to me too. You might have already grasped what some of the risks are with the USDT. Let's be a bit more comprehensive. We've already seen that Tether has strayed far from its original ideals and no longer backs its tokens with cash. Instead, it has a variety of collateral with varying degrees of risk. The value of the collateral, therefore, is at risk of a fall and not being able to support the tokens in existence. And be aware that the reserves, as published by Tether itself, are not subject to a satisfactory audit, in my opinion, and indeed very little is known about how they are actually managed. According to LinkedIn, looking at Tether's own post, they claim to have fewer than 50 employees. Now, it isn't clear how many less than 50, but to manage $66 billion reserves, plus all the front-facing token management, is 50 really enough? I'm not sure, but it doesn't sound a lot to me. On the plus side, approximately 6 months ago, Tether did have a run of around $10 billion in just a couple of weeks. Now, clearly the fact that it was able to manage that shows a certain resilience, and the fact that it had liquidity to manage the withdrawals means it's still here today. So I mentioned the audits. Tether does subject its assets to a quarterly audit, and these demonstrate that the values are enough to cover the Tether tokens that have been issued, in theory to the last token. Although earlier this year their auditors were based in the Cayman Islands and more recently they changed them and now they're based in Italy. I can't make sense of this myself. But there is a downside. These audits may be painting a false sense of confidence. The quarterly audits are only taken on one part of Tether's balance sheet on 4 quarterly days a year. Why don't they have a full P&L, cash flow and balance sheet audit each period? It does leave a bit of a question mark, to say the least. Anyway, despite the backing, we have seen that Tether really can deviate from its $1 target. So that shows the market can move against all of those assets. Your $1 token may not be $1 when you come to redeem. You can't buck the market, as a famous politician once said. There is a lot of damage to the reputation of Tether's management with all those lies, and this will probably never go away while Tether is under the same management. As a result, if management truly do need to express confidence in the coin in any troubled circumstances, then who's going to believe them? I will take my money now and then decide whether you are being honest afterwards, is going to be the sentiment. You betcha. Another risk relates to competition. Changpeng Zhao, he who had the feud with Sam Bankman-Fried, would love to see the demise of Tether, a direct competitor to BUSD, his own stablecoin. Now, we've seen in the FTX case that he can be ruthless in pursuing his objectives when need be. For example, announcing on Twitter that he would sell FTX's FTT token at the worst possible time for FTX. Generally, competition should be good, but if it does come to a do or die between BUSD and USDT, then I suspect both will be hurt and all the investors alongside them in the process. In case you don't think this is a real threat, let me give you an example. A couple of months ago, CZ or Changpeng Zhao was reported to have around $13 billion in USDT. What if he decided to announce a sell-off on Twitter? That could really create a run on Tether, perhaps terminal. Centralization. Counter to the cryptocurrency ethos of decentralization, USDT is centralized around one company that therefore asks its users to put their trust in a single point of failure. The company has also been exposed in the past as lying about its one-to-one US dollar backing, something that actually couldn't happen with an asset like Bitcoin. Only this year in 2022, New York prosecutors made a settlement with iFinex, the parent company of Tether, and the crypto exchange Bitfinex. They were accused of unlawfully hiding losses. Losses? Good grief, I'm already nervous. Attorney General Letitia James stated, Tether's claims that its virtual currency was fully backed by US dollars at all times was a lie. Hyphenex had to pay an $18.5 million fine and is now no longer allowed to operate in New York. And also, it will have to provide quarterly reports on its reserves. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the company denies it did anything wrong. So if these guys tell you it's all going to be okay, you're going to believe them, right? Anyway, if you didn't think centralization itself is a risk, then I'm sure those paragraphs I've just read are making you think twice. So what would be the industry impact of a USDT failure? Well, we've already heard USDT is huge. It's the largest stablecoin by market capitalization and the third largest cryptocurrency in the world. It's approximately 85% of Bitcoin's volume. With it gone, some estimates say Bitcoin would immediately fall to around $5,000. Anyone in the industry, and I mean pretty much all of them with any loans backed by Bitcoin, would see themselves underwater almost immediately. There would be a mass exodus. Rohan Gray, an assistant law professor at the Willamette University College of Law, told the Financial Times, "The growing world of stablecoins arguably underpins the entire crypto community right now. If that collapses, the whole space could collapse." And don't forget, in terms of the industry, there is no financial backup. During the global financial crisis, reserve banks around the world printed money to keep the system operational. This is not going to happen with crypto. Banking regulations and the regulatory system. Well, Tether has jumped from one banking partner and regulatory jurisdiction to another over the course of its existence, and this practice has raised concerns over the project's legitimacy and future legal standing. Tether has also been dubbed a loosely controlled bank by some industry observers, again a red flag here. The process by which new USDT is minted and their internal auditing practices operate in a black box with limited transparency. So is Tether USDT safe? Well, USDT is seen as efficient as a stable coin. It is, however, controversial, as we've heard, and for good reason. Lack of transparency, limited cash or cash equivalent holdings make it inherently risky. However, USDT does have big reserves, and it claims, note the word it claims, to have a large amount of cash ready to match any withdrawals. Tether maintains it would require a large bank run to depeg USDT, i.e. move from 1-to-1 with the dollar, but I've shown you that this has already happened. If that drop to 95% we looked at had prompted a wave of further withdrawals, then we could have seen the equivalent of a bank run. The same thing that happened at FTX. Hopefully you've learned something from this content. Before my last piece of advice, if you could like and subscribe to the channel, I'd be immensely grateful. And the last piece of advice, echoing a large number of crypto pundits out there, if you need to use USDT to transact, then do it with the bare number of tokens you need to effect the transaction, and do not use it as a store of wealth. And that's it from me. Bye for now.